Okay, so that's where we left off last week. So at the last sentence on 97 is where we'll start out. It says, for the type of alcoholic who is able and willing to get well, little charity in the ordinary sense of the word is needed or wanted. That's an interesting sentence too, because how many times have we read already? Who doesn't recover? It says rarely does anyone not recover, if you know that and how it works. Those that cannot or will not. Cannots and will nots. Those are the people who don't recover. So they're saying for the one who is able, that means he can, and willing, that means he will. Then there's little charity in the ordinary sense of the word is needed or wanted. The men who cry for money and shelter before conquering alcohol are on the wrong track. You may get this when you're working with somebody. Yet we do go to great extremes to provide each other with these very things when such action is warranted. This may seem inconsistent, but we think it is not. It is not the matter of giving that is in question, but when and how to give. That often makes a difference between failure and success. Would underline this: the minute we put our work on the service plane, the alcoholic commences to rely upon our assistance rather than upon God. A very, very misconception that I have found in AA from my own experience. I'm not giving you my opinion, I'm giving my experience. There's it seemed over the decades that I was in AA before I studied this, I would hear so often, you don't hear a lot about working with people, but when you do, it's this sort of deal. Will you sponsor me? Yeah, I'll sponsor you. And the first thing I want you to do, I want you to call me every day. What does that sentence say when they say, I want you to call me every day? You're pretty much saying that your recovery is dependent on you calling me every day, which break that down. Your recovery is dependent on me. That's what your recovery is not dependent on me. Have we not read already? All we do is lay the spiritual kit of tools at their feet. It's up to them to pick it up. And the outcome of what happens as a result of that is between them and God. We're beyond human aid. I am one who is beyond human aid. I can't solve your problems. I cannot manage your life because I can't manage my own life. I need God to help me. You're going to need the same. And I can show you how to make that connection to make that happen. But that's what they're saying here is to not allow them to start relying on your assistance rather than God, because that's putting this all ass backwards if we do that. He clamors for this or that, claiming he cannot master alcohol until his material needs are cared for. Nonsense. Some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn the truth. And underline this, I've used this a lot with people. Job or no job, wife or no wife, we simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence upon other people ahead of dependence upon God, period. Job or no job, wife. I've heard that so many times. Well, I'm just, I got to get my wife back, and what can we do? And maybe you can meet with her, blah, 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 blah. You know what? This whole deal in step 3 about making a decision to turn our will in our lives, our will is our thoughts and our lives is our actions. I'm turning everything over. I'm turning my ambitions. I'm turning everything I want out of life. What I have learned by now is that me trying to get what I want out of life, we all go through life like that, right? We try to make ourselves happy, I guess, at the end of the day. I'm going to get and make decisions and do things that at the end I believe are going to make me happy. And the question at this interval, it's not even about alcohol. The question at this interval is, how has that worked out for you thus far? How has that worked out? Because it has been your best thinking that has brought you to exactly where you are today. Are you convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success? And let that go. It's about a complete dependence on God, not on anything else. That means, what if God's will is that you aren't to have your wife back? I took that hard knock. I wanted that more than anything. But I tell you today, my life is far better than anything I could have imagined. Job or no job, are you willing? When they talk about willing to go to any lengths, there are lengths we take. And this idea, I think, is the basis of that. Regardless, if God's going to take you to and decide that you're going to be a monk, are you willing to do whatever he's going to guide you to do? Because the alternative to it is to run your own life again. How's that worked out? That's the question, right? So we don't stop drinking as long as we're dependent upon other people, our sponsors, our wife, our job, whatever. Burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. The only condition is one, that he trust in God, and two, that he clean house, steps 4 through 9. So now the domestic problem. There may be divorce, separation, or just strained relations. When your prospect has made such reparation as he can to his family and has thoroughly explained to them the new principles by which he is living, he should proceed to put those principles into action at home. What principles are we talking about?
Steps.
4 through 9. That's the principles. That's the principles that lead to what we're doing now, which is 10 through 12, which is basically 4 through 9. These are the principles. Putting people, making amends, cleaning house every day. Every day. That is, if he's lucky enough to have a home. Though his family be at fault in many respects, he should not be concerned about that. He should concentrate on his own spiritual demonstration. So we're talking about he should put these spiritual principles at work, at home, and he should concentrate on his own spiritual demonstration. We're in the back of the book. Let's go back to the beginning of the book and look at page 19. Because notice again, we're not talking anything about drinking here now, are we? If you look on page 19, the first paragraph, drop down 3 lines, that first full sentence says, we feel that the elimination of drinking is but a beginning. So if that's all, this is a hard thing for me to learn. That is, there's no hierarchy in AA. I don't care how long somebody's been sober. I've known from myself, of many of you know, 13 years sober, suicidal. Suicidal, right? The amount of time that you've been sober means nothing. Sober by the dictionary definition is not drunk. That's all it means. Nothing else has changed. We're just not drinking now. And we get really, really miserable if we don't become recovered. That's why we keep going back out and out and out again and again and again and don't understand why, because we haven't recovered. So that's just the beginning. If you've been sober 5, 10 years and have not done any of this work that's in here, you've just made a beginning. A real long one, but it's still just the beginning and nothing more. This is where it goes into what we just read. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our homes, in our occupations, in our affairs. So when we talk about in our homes, in our occupations, and our affairs, is there anything else in our lives? We work, we're at home, and then we have the rest of our affairs. We practice these principles all the time. That demonstration, all of us spend much of our time in that sort of an effort. So that's what they're talking about, bringing this at home. And we should concentrate on our own spiritual demonstration. It's another thing to outline for somebody who is working with somebody new. This is one of the first things that I like to point out to a newcomer. Because again, they're not dependent on me, but what did we learn about resentment? The number one offender. Not only the number one offender, the next line says is that it kills more alcoholics than anything. More than Jack Daniels and Jim Beam combined. It kills more alcoholics than anything, resentment. And it says we need to avoid it like the plague. So that's what this next sentence says. Argument and fault finding are to be avoided like the plague. Why? Because that's what's going to kill you. So you're working with a newcomer, it's not about, well, don't go into a bar and stay away from your friends who drink. Anything about that. You know what's going to kill you? Is resentment. And you need to avoid fault finding at home specifically, but also in your affairs, anything. Fault finding and argument. Avoid it like the plague, man, because that's what's going to kill you. Very important piece. In many homes, this is a difficult thing to do, but it must. Anybody here, there's no must in AA? How many musts have we read so far in the first portion of this book? But it must be done if any results are to be expected. If persisted in for a few months, they're giving us a timeline. If you do this for a few months, the effect on a man's family is sure to be great. The most incompatible people discover they have a basis upon which they can meet. Little by little, the family may, 1, see their own defects, and 2, admit them. These can then be discussed in an atmosphere of helpfulness and friendliness, changing the entire dynamic at home. After they've seen tangible results, The family will perhaps want to come along. A lot of times they're going to hold back and wait. Mine never came along, by the way, so don't expect that that will always happen because it doesn't always happen. But they need to see your principles being demonstrated. Didn't we read earlier that they're more interested in seeing our principles than hearing what we have to say with all of our sweet promises and that they've heard over and over and over again that we've never been able to fulfill. They're more interested in seeing what our feet are doing, not what our mouth's doing. These things will come to pass naturally in good time, provided, however, and I would underline, this is the provision, that the alcoholic continues to demonstrate that he can be sober and that he can be considerate and that he can be helpful, regardless of what anyone says or what anyone does. Now, how in the world are we going to do that? Well, we don't have the power to remove our character defects. Sounds like we're going to be doing a lot of dependence upon God. God, what did we read back in that chapter as well? Save me from being angry. I don't try to stop me from being angry, right? That is the dependence on God. I don't try to change me, be nicer, kinder. I have to ask God. If I ain't convinced of that yet, again, keep trying and see how your personal relations work out. How has it worked out so far? It's generally worked out just the same as drinking. I keep going back to it and I keep repeating the same patterns over and over. Something has to change. Of course, we all fall much below this standard many times, but we must try to repair the damage immediately lest we pay the penalty by a spree. So we must try to repair the damage immediately. Does everybody know what step that has to do with? Hey, 10. Very good. Very good. Page 84 tells us that's what we do is we repair the damage immediately, the timeline. So we don't have to go back and do a 4-step again. We discussed this before. If you go through your 4-step and you go all the way down to your 9-step and you make amends and you clean up your entire past, when you make a mistake and you realize it and you make your amends immediately, you're not going to have all this crap build up again and block you off from God. We do it immediately, lest we pay the penalty by a spree. I guess I'll ask this as well. Does anybody remember the definition of what a spree is? What do they mean by a spree? What is a spree? Unrestricted overindulgence. Does anybody, if you look back at your drinking, does that characterize anybody's drinking as unrestricted overindulgence? That's what they say is going to happen, right? If there be divorce or separation, there should be no undue haste for the couple to get together. You're working with a new person. Listen to this. If they want to, you know what, we're better now and we want to get back together and start working this out. What does this say? Do's and don'ts. There should be no undue haste for them to get together. The man should be sure of his recovery. There's a caveat. The wife should fully understand his new way of life. If their old relationship is to be resumed, it must, there's that word again, be on a better basis, since the former did not work. That's a great thing to point out. Back to, how did it work out for you? Every time you tried changing and I'm going to do better, how did that work out for you? Why are you here? Right? It has to be on a different basis. This means a new attitude and spirit all around. Sometimes it is to the best interest of all concerned the couple remain apart. That's what happened with me. Obviously, no rule can be laid down. Let the alcoholic continue his program day by day. Do what you're supposed to do and let God provide for you. That was what we decided in step 3, right? God's going to provide everything we need. I'm not going to try providing what I need. God will provide what I need if I stick close to him and perform his work well. He provides what I need, not if I go ahead and try to perform my work well to get what I want. It's completely the opposite. I do what he wants and he provides what I need, and we trust in that. When the time for living together has come, it will be apparent to both parties. So see, you don't have to give your opinion on somebody's domestic issues when you're working with them. It's right here. This is what we do. Point it out to them. It'll be apparent when it's time. No undue haste to get together. Start living your program day by day and see where it goes. See where God takes you, because it says here, it will be apparent to both of you that it's time to get together if that time comes. Period. Not my opinion. I'm not running your life. I'm just telling you what they're saying here. Underline again here, let no alcoholic say he cannot recover unless he has his family back. God, have I heard that so many times. Can't recover unless I have my family back. This just isn't so. In some cases, the wife will never come back for one reason or another. Remind the prospect that his, again, underlying his recovery is not dependent on other people. It is dependent upon his relationship with God, period. We've seen men get well whose families have not returned at all. I'm one of them. We have seen others slip when the family came back too soon. Never liked that word there. It's the only place I see it in here when they talk about a slip. Because when you think about the word slip, what is a slip? When you slip, is that intentional or is that an accident? Usually when we slip, that's an accident. When we drink, it is no accident. I mean, we have learned by this point that alcoholism is deadly. To drink is to die. So if you pick up a drink, I don't know that I would characterize that as a slip. I think a more accurate description would be if you didn't die from it, it would be more of an unsuccessful suicide attempt. Because you know it's going to kill you. If it didn't work, then it didn't work. But that's suicide. We have seen, where are we at? Both you and your new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. And amen, I've already mentioned that. And I remember thinking this some years ago, that if somebody would have asked me when I first started studying this book to recover, which wasn't until I had been sober for, I don't know, 15 years, until I actually started learning how to recover and took these actions and recovered. I wasn't recovered during all that time, but I was very involved in AA, just not recovered, very sick. But if you had asked me to write down when you have recovered for like 5 years, at 5 years, what would you want your life to look like? Like best case scenario, what would it be? And I guarantee you, I would have sold myself far short compared to what my life is like today. 100%, all the way around. It doesn't happen all the way around necessarily for everybody where it's financial, material, but what's going on the inside, hands down, much better by putting myself in God's hands than anything I could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. This is included even, you hear people who go to the jail meetings and talk to some of these guys who have recovered. No matter what their current circumstances, they can be much happier than many of us that are out here among us with all the freedoms in the world in front of us. Right? This is an inside deal. And this works if we play. This is the whole decision really with AA, guys. It's either you're going to put yourself into God's hands or you're not. The one benefit we get is yes, we will be able to stop drinking. The obsession of the mind that the doctor talks about will get removed. That will happen. That happened to me. It didn't keep a 45 out of my hand and pointed to my head, but I didn't drink. And in fact, drinking wasn't an option. But checking out was. I knew what drinking would do. So having that removed is one thing. But when you read, again, back about the promises that they read at other meetings, we don't read them here. That's what we're talking about. Isn't that really what we all came here for to begin with? Is we just can't stand the way we feel? I mean, it took me a while to honestly search myself for this, but I didn't come to AA. I don't believe that my goal was I want to quit drinking. I thought I have to quit drinking, but I didn't want to quit drinking. I just wanted to feel better. I just didn't want to be miserable all the time, on the wrong side of every argument. Self-esteem just down here. Just couldn't stand myself. Constantly in conflict with everybody and finding no way out of that. The doctor says problems pile up on us and become astonishingly difficult to solve. That's what I want solved. And we've already read that practicing these spiritual principles, the guy said that he's learned practicing spiritual principles would solve all of our problems. That's what we're here for. And it's not going to happen if you're an alcoholic of the description in this book. That will not happen in our experience if all you do is come to meetings. Go to 90 meetings in 90 days and get a sponsor and call them every day. That is not going to do it. It's not going to do it. Might keep you sober, might not be drunk, but think about it. If you're new, less than 6 months, or maybe even at your first meeting, Chances are you probably weren't drunk then. You handle that on your own, right? It's not about that. It's about the way we feel. When working with a man and his family, you should take care not to participate in their quarrels. There's a clear-cut direction. You may spoil your chance of being helpful if you do. But urge upon the man's family that he has been a very sick person. We're going to need to teach them about that sickness that we've learned in the first few chapters. What does it mean for him to be a sick person? Spiritually, physically, and mentally sick. And two, they should treat him accordingly. What does that mean? You need to treat him like a sick person. Didn't we learn that about the thing with the resentment? Said one of the tools that we do is when somebody offends us and we're getting ready to snap back, we need to look at them as they are sick people, not putting ourselves above them in that way, but they are sick people just like me. They are sick in self. The idea of being sick in self and being full of selfishness, that is not just limited to the alcoholic class, all right? There's nobody that is immune to that. That's why our way of living has its advantages for all. It's about getting rid of this selfishness and self-centeredness. So treat them that way as if they're sick. That's what we're going to tell them. You should warn against arousing resentment or jealousy. And we already know why. We don't want to arouse jealousy or resentment. You should point out that his defects of character are not going to disappear overnight. Show them that he has entered upon a period of growth. Ask them to remember, when they are impatient, the blessed fact of his sobriety. If you've been successful in solving your own domestic problems, tell the newcomer's family how that was accomplished. Now we can talk about me, what I have done as a result of the principles of this book, right? In this way, you can set them on the right track without becoming critical of them. The story of how you and your wife settled your difficulties is worth any amount of criticism. So assuming we are spiritually fit, we read about that on 84 too. Assuming you're spiritually fit, you can do all sorts of things alcoholics are not supposed to do. So this brings us to another whole different phase of one of the biggest things that I think, and I heard in AA for the longest time, I call them misconceptions now, is, has anybody ever heard, okay, stay away from wet places and wet faces. Stay away from the people you used to drink with. Stay away from the places you used to drink at. You need to stay away from these places. Has anybody ever heard that? It was a big thing in the 80s and 90s. Yeah. So let's see what the book has to say about staying away from wet places and wet faces. People have said we must not go where liquor is served. We must not have it in our homes. We must shun friends who drink. We must avoid moving pictures which show drinking scenes. We must not go into bars. Our friends must hide their bottles if we go to their houses. We mustn't think or be reminded of alcohol at all, right? Hide it. Well, our experience shows that's not necessarily so. We meet these conditions every day. And I would underline this. An alcoholic who cannot meet these conditions still has an alcoholic mind. He has not recovered his sanity. He has not had a spiritual experience. You know, it always reminds me back to when I was in Florida learning this stuff. There's this one guy who he'd been coming around so long, I don't know, it just never quite got in, I think. But he kept coming to these meetings, but he'd always say, I can't go down the alcohol aisle in public still today. I've been sober 6 years, but I can't do that. Well, what does the book say? You must still have an alcoholic mind. You probably can't. You're probably right. Right? But there's a way out of that. We don't have to be in that condition forever. Right? You still have an alcohol. There's something the matter with his spiritual status. His only chance for sobriety would be someplace like the Greenland ice cap, and even there, an Eskimo might turn up with a bottle of scotch and ruin everything. Ask any woman who has sent her husband to distant places on the theory he would escape the alcohol problem, like a treatment center. That'll fix him. Underlying in our belief, any scheme of combating alcoholism which proposes to shield the sick man from temptation is doomed to failure. So how does that correlate with stay away from wet places and wet faces? I mean, think about that. Just even think about the concept of it, even if you haven't studied this. Stay away from people you used to drink with and stay away from places you used to drink at. And what do they mean by that? Well, if you stay away from them, then what's going to happen? You're going to be able to stay sober? Well, then that means that you would therefore have power over alcohol if I just do those things. You haven't even got the concept of step one. And I repeated that for years. And it's just complete. It's not only wrong, it's completely 180 from what's in this book. Isn't that incredible? Yeah. If the alcoholic tries to shield himself, he may succeed for a time. Some of us have done. Let me ask you this. Anybody ever able to stop drinking on their own for a year or more? Because I did it. Some may be shocked to hear that if you go to other meetings. Like, I don't know, if I didn't go to my meetings every day, within a week or two, I don't know what would happen. Well, some of us are able to stay sober for a long time. You know what? If you don't understand why that is, you might think, maybe I'm not an alcoholic. We read in the beginning, that's one of the big misconceptions that alcoholics get. Well, I've been sober this long. It can't be the same. I'm sure I can handle a couple of drinks now, right? But it says we can do that. What did we read about the man of 30? Guy stayed sober 25 years, right? Said, I want to have a successful business career. I'm going to quit drinking. It was ruining his life. And he was able to stop on his own willpower for 25 years. And at the end of it, he retired, successful, started drinking, got into a lot of trouble, decided, whoop, this is just as bad, if not worse than it was. I need to quit again. And this time he found he couldn't. It progressed even while he wasn't drinking. And what did it say? He was dead within 4 years. Right? So we can stay sober for a while. It means absolutely nothing. We can shield ourselves and we may succeed for a time, but he usually winds up with a bigger explosion than ever. We've tried these methods. These attempts to do the impossible have always failed. So our rule is not to avoid a place where there is drinking if we have a legitimate reason for being there. Highlight, underline. That is in italics. That is important. You do not avoid it if you have a legitimate reason for being there. What do they mean by that? That includes bars, nightclubs, dances, receptions, weddings, and even those plain, ordinary whoopee parties. I've never been invited to one of those yet. I'm still not sure what that is, but apparently you can go to them too. To a person who has had experience with an alcoholic, this may seem like tempting providence, but it isn't. You will note that we've made an important qualification. Underline, here's your directions. Therefore, ask yourself on each occasion. And this is directed to the newcomer. When you're working with them, point this out, right? Have I any good social, business, or personal reason for going to this place? Or am I expecting to steal a little vicarious pleasure from the atmosphere of such places? If your answer to these questions is satisfactory, you need have no apprehension. Go or stay away, whichever seems best. Be sure you are on solid spiritual ground before you start and that your motive in going is thoroughly good, period. You're spiritually fit and that your motive is good. Do not think of what you will get out of the occasion. Instead, think of what you can bring to it. Remember, we're self-centered. What can I get? What can I get? No, what can I bring? What can I give? But if you are shaky, you'd better work with another alcoholic instead. Notice that I wonder how many people in AA, if you told them, I'm feeling pretty shaky and ready to drink, they're going to tell you go to a meeting. You need to go to a meeting. Call your sponsor. What do they say here? If you're shaky, you better work with another alcoholic. Huh? You need to be working with somebody else. Because didn't we read in the beginning of this chapter, nothing is going to so much ensure your immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics, not meetings. Why sit with a long face in places where there is drinking, sighing about the good old days? If it's a happy occasion, try to increase the pleasure of those there. If it's a business occasion, go and attend to your business enthusiastically. If you are with a person who wants to eat in a bar, by all means, go along. Let your friends know you're not to change their habits on your account. How about that? You can drink around me. It's not a problem. At a proper time and place, explain to all your friends why alcohol disagrees with you. So I'll tell you how I did that. The directions aren't completely clear, but it does tell them why it doesn't agree with you. And the way that I went about that is you can drink when you're around me. Yes, I'm an alcoholic. You don't even have to say you're an alcoholic. It's just, I have an allergy to alcohol. I just can't drink it, right? If I have an allergic to fish, I don't say, hey, nobody in the table order fish. I can't look at it. That's not the case, right? Just disagrees with me. That's why it disagrees with me. If you do this thoroughly, few people will ask you to drink. No kidding. They're not going to ask you to eat fish, are they? Well, just try this. I'm telling you, this might not give you the reaction you normally get where it's going to kill you. No, they're not going to ask. While you were drinking, you were withdrawing from life little by little. Now you are getting back into the social life of this world. Don't start to withdraw again just because your friends drink liquor. But underline this. This is our new job. Remember, we learned in step 3, he's the director, we're the actors, he's the principal, we are his agents, right? He's the father, we are his children. Your job now, this is your new job now that you've recovered. Your job now is to be at a place where you may be of maximum helpfulness to other people. Not of maximum benefit to me, but maximum benefit to other people. What did we read in the 3rd step prayer? You know, it always hits me when we read that part where it says, we're asking God, relieve me of the bondage of self. Take away my difficulties, right? Take away all my problems, God. But it doesn't say so that I can be happy. Mm-hmm. It says, take away my problems that it may bear witness to those around me of your power. Let them show through this. What we're reading here, it works. I'm proof. That's what we want to show, right? All right, so your job is to be of maximum helpfulness to others. So never hesitate to go anywhere if you can be helpful. You should not hesitate to visit the most sordid spot on earth on such an errand. Keep on the firing line of life with these motives, and God will keep you unharmed. God will provide what you need. Many of us keep liquor in our homes. We often need it to carry green recruits through a severe hangover. Some of us still serve it to our friends, provided they are not alcoholic. But some of us think we should not serve liquor to anyone. So what should we do? It says we never argue this question. We feel that each family, in the light of their own circumstances, ought to decide for themselves. Myself, I keep alcohol in the home. My wife drinks a glass of wine maybe once, maybe twice a month, but maybe once a month, you know. But that's not a problem. I look at it exactly what we just said. I'm allergic to that. So, you know, it's deadly to me. It's not to her. She's not an alcoholic. She's the one that can drink one and get into a second one and say, whoa, I got to stop. I'm feeling that. And I'm looking at that saying, what do you mean you're going to stop because you're feeling that? Right? Why did you start? Why would you stop now? It's just getting going, right? I don't understand that. It's even funny. My future son-in-law yesterday was talking about, we went to a restaurant that he works at. He's a server, and he said, yeah, this bartender, he like really loads up at the end of the night. He made me a Coke and Jack, and he said he poured it like that much of a Jack Daniels in that. And I was like, no way. I'm thinking, my God, are we really different, aren't we? I'd have been like so happy. I got like 2 drinks in one and just excited about it. I can't drink that. There's too much alcohol in it. I don't think I've ever said that. You know, if you think about these things, you can clearly see the difference between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic, just in the way we think and our perception. So again, it's up to you. To me, it's poison. I'm not tempted by it if somebody else has it. Just like if I'm allergic to fish, if you eat it, I'm like, damn, I really, really wish I could get a hold of that. That doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. That's the obsession. When that gets removed, we're placed in a position of neutrality, right? It's that simple. We are careful never to show intolerance or hatred of drinking as an institution. There's a clear-cut direction. Experience shows that such an attitude is not helpful to anyone. Every new alcoholic looks for this spirit among us and is immensely relieved when he finds we are not witch burners. So particularly they're talking about when you're working with a new person. If they don't have any experience with AA, what are they thinking? You're going to be anti-alcohol. Can't have it anywhere. And then they're relieved to find out that's not the case at all, right? We don't want to show intolerance. We're trying to be helpful to anyone and everyone, right? A spirit of intolerance might repel alcoholics whose lives could be saved had it not been for such stupidity. We would not even do the cause of temperate drinking any good, for not one drinker in 1,000 likes to be told anything about alcohol by one who hates it, right? Someday we hope that Alcoholics Anonymous will help the public to better realize the gravity of the alcoholic problem. But we shall be of little use if our attitude is one of bitterness or hostility. Drinkers will not stand for it. Now back up. Don't we know this was written in 1939, and there was a very big stigma at that time about alcoholism. You are weak-willed, you're a low life. And now we know that this is an illness and these people are sick. The public perception has changed greatly, and a great deal of it has to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. So that has changed. But I'd underline this last statement again, that's in italics. After all, our problems were of our own making. Bottles were just a symbol. Remember, drinking was not the problem. Our problems are of our own making. It's selfishness, self-centeredness. That's the core of our problem. Besides, we've stopped fighting anybody or anything. We have to. And that ends that chapter.